Hello everyone, this is Mr. Wolf, and I'm really excited to be reading with you today. It is January 30th, which is Fred Korematsu's birthday. He would be 102 today. And in California, it is Fred Korematsu Day of Civil Liberties and the Constitution. So I'm really excited to continue reading with you Fred Korematsu Speaks Up. This is written by Laura Atkins and Stan Yogi, illustrated by Yutaka Houlette, and published by Hayday Books. Head down to the description below for the link where you can purchase your own copy of Fred Korematsu Speaks Up. For now, we are on to Chapter 11. Uncovering Lies, 1982. One January morning, Fred receives a phone call. A man named Peter Irons wants to meet with him. He has new information about Fred's case. It has been nearly 40 years since the United States Supreme Court ruled against Fred. Though several people have asked him to talk about what happened, Fred has almost always said no. Now, Fred says yes. Peter arrives with a tape recorder in hand and gives Fred documents to read. Peter found them in the National Archives, the place where government papers are kept. Fred reads page after page, silently, for 30 minutes. He finds out that people in the military and lawyers for the government lied. They had no evidence that Japanese Americans were spies or a risk to the country. The whole case was built on lies. Lies that locked up Fred, his family, and 120,000 Japanese Americans. Lies that stole toys from children and pets from families. Lies that ripped people from their lives and threw them back in without homes or jobs. Fred puts down the papers. They did me a great wrong, he says. Peter tells him that it is possible to reopen Fred's case based on these documents. Are you a lawyer? Fred asks. Yes, I am. Would you like to be my lawyer? Fred asks. A team of lawyers gather and get to work. Most of them are young Japanese Americans, children of people who were imprisoned. When they first crowd into Fred and Catherine's living room, Fred leans over and whispers to Peter, "Hey, these look like high school kids." "Oh no, they're the best," Peter replies. When Fred sees them in action, he agrees, and the team becomes part of the Korematsu family. The lawyers work for no money, but from a firm belief that it is time for the truth to be told. Almost 2 years pass as they gather evidence and figure out the best way to challenge Fred's conviction. At first, Fred stays in the background, letting the lawyers do the talking. Then he decides it is important to step forward. When he speaks out loud again about what happened to him and other Japanese Americans, his courage glows through his no-nonsense words and quiet voice. Reopening the case. We'll begin with some of our vocabulary words. National Archives, the part of the United States government that houses government records and documents. Government misconduct, behavior by the government that is legally or morally wrong. Reopening the case. Professor Peter Irons and researcher Aiko Herzig Yoshinaga found papers in dusty boxes in the National Archives proving that the United States government's lawyers had lied to the Supreme Court. The lawyers had told the judges that there were reasons to believe that Japanese Americans were signaling to enemy ships and submarines. In fact, these lawyers had read reports that there was no evidence of Japanese Americans signaling to the enemy, and that almost all Japanese Americans were loyal to the United States. But the government's lawyers did not give these reports to the Supreme Court. Instead, they lied and said the opposite was true. This was government misconduct. Had the judges on the Supreme Court known the truth, Fred might have won his case. And we have pictures of Aiko Herzig Yoshinaga and Peter Irons. And then this memo from one government lawyer to another is one of the documents that Peter Irons and Aiko Herzig Yoshinaga found. In this memo, written in 1944, lawyer Edward Ennis explains that Lieutenant General John L. DeWitt's report contained lies, and that there was no evidence that Japanese Americans were sending messages to the enemy. The report was still presented to the Supreme Court, even though the government knew it was untrue. We have a reminder of some vocabulary words. New one. Sensei, the children of Nisei, and reparations, money paid to make up for harm done. Because of what Peter and Aiko had discovered, Fred had the rare opportunity to reopen his case. Ernest Bessig had been Fred's ally all those years earlier, helping him to fight for justice. Now, Peter, Aiko, and the other lawyers who helped Fred reopen his case became his allies too. When Fred decided to reopen the case, he took a risk. If a judge ruled against Fred, he would face the disappointment of losing all over again. The loss might also hurt Japanese Americans as a group. Nisei and Sansei activists were trying to pass a law to make the United States government apologize to Japanese Americans who had been wrongfully imprisoned during World War II, and to pay them reparations for their losses and suffering. If Fred lost his case again, it might hurt their effort. But if Fred won, he would not only clear his own name, he would also help prevent the government from treating other groups unfairly in the future. We have two photographs. In the 1970s and 1980s, many Japanese Americans began speaking up about the hardships they had suffered in prison camps and how the experience had torn their lives apart. In this picture, Japanese American activists and their allies are marching for justice and reparations. Many of the Japanese American lawyers who helped Fred reopen his case had parents who had been in prison camps. Some of Fred's lawyers are in this picture. Bottom row, from left, Dale Minami, Fred Korematsu, Peter Irons. Back row, from left, Don Tamaki, Dennis Hayashi, and Lorraine Benai. And we have a question for you to answer in the comments below. If you failed at something, have you ever taken a big risk to try again? And finally, our timeline. September 1981. Peter Irons and Aiko Herzig Yoshinaga find documents showing the government lied. January 12th, 1982. Fred meets with Peter Irons. January 31st, 1983. Fred and his lawyers officially reopen this case. His case. So that is the end of chapter 11. We are on to our last chapter, chapter 12. I really, as always, encourage you to go into the link below and purchase your own copy of Fred Korematsu Speaks Up. It's going to be really important, especially if you want to do something like reading this memo, all of the primary sources that they give. If you really want to appreciate them, you need to purchase this book yourself. But for now, thank you so much for reading along.